Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a really grounded, honest conversation about a very specific kind of exhaustion. I'm talking about that deep, frustrating ache of feeling totally called to do something, doing all the right things, but still feeling just completely unfulfilled. Have you ever felt like you're endlessly busy, you're being faithful to all your daily responsibilities, but that one big thing you deeply know you're meant to do hasn't even started yet? Well, that's exactly what we're exploring today, the classroom of the wilderness and what delay is actually doing in you. I am so glad we're tackling this, because if you relate to that heavy weight of doing everything right but still waiting, we really want to validate that specific tiredness for you. It's a profound burden to carry, honestly, and it's absolutely crucial to clarify right up front, feeling this way, it isn't ingratitude. It's not just you being restless for the sake of being restless. What you're experiencing is the very real, very difficult tension of being stuck in a season of becoming when you desperately just want to be arriving.
Exactly. And this isn't some new phenomenon or a sign that you've messed up along the way. In fact, looking at Ecclesiastes 3:1, it beautifully reminds us, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven." We're bringing this up because we need to establish that these seasons of obscure preparation, these incredibly long, quiet periods, they are a recurring biblical experience. Being in a waiting period is absolutely not a personal failure. It's not a sign that you've been forgotten or that you just completely made up your calling. It's actually an essential, deeply intentional part of the design.
And honestly, there's no better example of this than Moses. Let's just map out his trajectory for a second. He doesn't begin his story in obscurity at all. From year 1 all the way to 40, he's raised in Pharaoh's palace. We're talking ultimate status, power, and access that most people in Egypt couldn't even fathom. But he has this deep, undeniable sense of purpose about his suffering people. So what does he do? He impulsively tries to force his calling. He strikes down an Egyptian. And in one single moment, his status, his grand plans, just entirely gone. He literally has to flee for his life into the wilderness, trading a massive palace for complete, sudden isolation.
40. I really want us to pause here and emphasize the sheer, staggering weight of that number. The book of Acts tells us Moses was in the wilderness for 40 years before God appeared to him again. Think about that. This wasn't a long weekend retreat, you guys. This wasn't a quick gap year to find himself. This is 40 years. That is the better part of an entire adult lifetime spent in quiet, unremarkable obscurity. Imagine measuring your own life by what was strictly visible during those 4 decades. You'd probably look around and reasonably conclude, well, I've been completely forgotten.
Okay, let's really dive into this, because this wasn't just empty waiting. Sure, it was a massive delay, but it was actively building something absolutely crucial. We like to call it the wilderness curriculum. You see, his impulsiveness, that sheer unguided force he used back in Egypt, that was entirely useless in the desert. It had to be systematically stripped away. It had to be replaced by necessary leadership traits before he could ever be utilized. Namely, he needed 3 things: patience, humility, and familiarity with the terrain. Let's break those down. Just notice the stark contrast we're exploring here. On side A, we have his former Egyptian reality, palace status. He had profound power, direct access to the top, and he used impulsive force to try and solve problems on his own strict timeline. But then, look at side B, his new reality, wilderness humility. Exodus actually identifies him simply as a son-in-law tending another man's flock. Just think about that massive, humbling shift in identity for a second. The man who would eventually stand before Pharaoh and demand the release of an entire nation. He first needed to learn how to hold absolutely zero status at all.
And this brilliantly illustrates the third part of that curriculum, familiarity with the terrain. Now, this is such a fascinating detail to me. The very wilderness Moses wandered as a forgotten, totally isolated shepherd was the exact terrain he was unwittingly mastering. Year after year, he learned where to find water, how to navigate the harsh environment, how to survive the elements. He probably thought he was just spinning his wheels, just waiting. But when it was finally time to lead a fragile, wandering nation through that exact same landscape, he already possessed the map in his head. The preparation was entirely hidden as waiting. So that brings us to section 2, the pattern, Joseph and David, because it's really crucial to understand that this massive gap between a calling and its realization, it isn't just an anomaly unique to Moses. It's not some one-off event. It is a consistent rule, a deeply defined pattern that we see repeated in other major biblical figures. Let's take a quick look at Joseph and David to see how this exact same rule applies.
Let's map out Joseph's trajectory first. Much like Moses, Joseph gets a really clear sense of purpose early on through these prophetic dreams. He knows, deep down, he's meant for a significant role. But almost immediately, boom, that calling is violently interrupted. He's betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and eventually thrown into prison for a crime he didn't even commit. Years and years pass with zero visible indication that his original calling is still valid. But skip ahead to year 13 and he is suddenly elevated. You see, the delay wasn't proof his calling was false. The delay was the actual necessary process that built the resilience, the administrative skill, and the wisdom that made his calling possible in the first place. And then, of course, we have David's arc. Now, David's story adds a really fascinating and frankly difficult complication to this pattern. He is anointed as the future king while he's just this overlooked young shepherd. But get this, being chosen actually actively endangered him. It didn't make his life easier or more comfortable or safer. Instead of getting a VIP pass straight to the palace to sit on the throne, his anointing led him into years of being hunted by King Saul, literally hiding out in desolate wilderness caves and strongholds. It was only after years of this intense, incredibly dangerous waiting that he finally took the throne. Being chosen definitely doesn't mean skipping the wilderness.
So this naturally brings us to a really crucial modern question. If you're going through this explainer right now and thinking, okay, yeah, I definitely feel like I'm in the wilderness right now, how do you know for sure? How do any of us know if we are actually in a productive season of biblical preparation, or if we are simply being passive, avoidant, and just, genuinely stuck?
Well, let's look at the stark differences here. Passive stuckness is sitting around twiddling your thumbs, waiting for some dramatic timing. It's actively avoiding your daily responsibilities because you feel they are somehow beneath you and constantly seeking immediate status. But faithful waiting? Honestly, that looks incredibly ordinary. It's Moses waking up and tending sheep again, day after day. It's Joseph diligently managing a household even while enslaved. Callings rarely, if ever, resume with cinematic lightning strikes. They almost always arrive while you are faithfully managing the unremarkable, daily work right in front of you.
Bringing the conversation right back to Moses in the burning bush for a moment, after 40 years of total silence, God finally speaks. And I love this. He doesn't do it in a grand temple or during some massive public event. He does it in the middle of an ordinary workday while Moses is just out there doing his job. And the instruction is crystal clear. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh. But here is the truly profound part. When God finally called him back into action, Moses did not respond with overwhelming confidence. Not even close.
Exactly. We really have to unpack this dynamic of doubt versus obedience. Moses actually objected to the call. He resisted it. He cited that he was not eloquent, essentially pleading, look, why would you choose me for this? And honestly, this is so incredibly reassuring. It proves that readiness for a calling and confidence about a calling are two entirely different things. You can be completely thoroughly prepared by God and still feel entirely inadequate. Moving forward in obedience doesn't require the absence of doubt. Moses was terrified, he had massive imposter syndrome, but he moved forward anyway. So if you are currently sitting right in the middle of your story today, we really want to offer this as some grounded encouragement. Romans 8:28 reminds us that we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Remember, Paul wrote this to real people who were still in the thick of their messy, unresolved stories, not to people who had already arrived at the finish line and had it all perfectly figured out. What looks like nothing happening in your life right now? It is actually vital, active preparation for what is coming. So the crucial takeaway here is this: that ache of feeling unfinished, it is not evidence that you misunderstood your calling. The delay isn't a mistake. It is the classroom. You are currently being given the patience, the humility, and the familiarity with the terrain that you will desperately need when the calling finally arrives. So keep managing those ordinary tasks. Keep tending the sheep. Your time in the wilderness is building the very foundation of your purpose. The question isn't, when will I arrive? But rather, what is this wilderness preparing me for? Chosen path to God. Not just chosen, prepared.